Hey everyone, Mark Hessman here, host of On the Mark on News Talk 1070 KHMO. All right, we are in this middle of this craziness of free agency. The tampering period opened on kind of like Sunday night into Monday at midnight. And officially free agency begins today on Wednesday, the 13th. So these contracts can actually start getting signed. There is one move in free agency that I didn't see coming as far as the money goes. I feel like my initial reaction was to overreact and call it kind of a crazy move. But the more and more that I keep looking at the contract and understanding the landscape of the NFL, the more and more I feel like the Atlanta Falcons and Kirk Cousins, this deal is a fantastic deal for both sides. Obviously for Kirk Cousins, he's getting basically $100 million guaranteed in the later part of his career. It makes a ton of sense from him. For him, his wife is, I think, from Georgia. Like, they have family in that area. His kids are young. You go spend a couple years there. I think, you certainly make a home in the Atlanta suburbs area. All of that kind of makes sense. But from Atlanta's perspective, this contract is really a 2-year deal. It's 2 years, $90 million. It's as simple as that. Don't look at the 4-year, $180 million. That's just there in place as those gigantic numbers. If everything goes out perfectly, incentives, he stays for 4 years, and all this, that, and the other. It's really a 2-year, $90 million guaranteed deal. And the next 2 years, the Atlanta Falcons are basically saying to themselves and their fan base and looking themselves in the mirror, saying, we have got to right this ship. We had a lot of stability for many years with Matt Ryan, had some coaching changes with Matt Ryan, and ever since we've moved off of Matt Ryan, it has just been a disaster. And we don't like being a disaster anymore. We like winning wild card playoff games. We like winning the division every couple of years in battling with New Orleans. We like going to the playoffs and being viable. And this is Atlanta saying we want to get back to that. We have a new head coach. We want to bring in this new culture. And so let us create ultimate stability at the quarterback position, the most important position for our franchise. And what Kirk will come in and immediately basically be able to figure out, can Bijan work? Can Kyle Pitts actually work? What's Drake London's ceiling? You go and sign Darnell Mooney. You give him another weapon. I think it makes a ton of sense for Atlanta, for them trying to say, listen, our division's wide open right now. We can bring Kirk Cousins in here. We can go out and win our division while we're kind of creating a culture, creating wins and stability and regaining control of the NFC South. While Carolina's a disaster, New Orleans is overpaying for Derek Carr, who's Kirk Cousins light. And we got to deal with Tampa and Baker. Well, we'll take our chances with Baker versus Kirk in kind of a head-to-head matchup in that way on kind of the same length of their contracts. So Atlanta's trying to once again reestablish a culture of winning. They can do that over the next 2 years with Kirk. And then in year 3 of this contract, it's basically $10 million guaranteed. So if Atlanta wants, after 2 years, they can then say, hey, Kirk, now's the time. You created this culture. You got us going. You righted the ship with the new head coach, Raheem Morris. We now have our culture. We have set in. Now let's go draft the guy who's going to be the future of our franchise for the next 5, 6, 7 years. And you help bring him along for a year. Kirk Cousins is that bridge. You keep him for that 4th year. You have him locked up. Or at that point in time, you could, after, that 1 year going to the final year of the contract, if Kirk wants to keep starting somewhere else, you trade him, you move on, and Kirk goes and gets more money and plays somewhere else. Or is then just the ultimate team guy and saying, hey, I'll help the young guy come along. It really gives Atlanta this year and next year to just know that Kirk is their starter, get their program righted, get back to winning, competing for that division in a wide open, easy division, the easiest division in the NFL, completely wide open. It makes a lot of sense. We're trying to get this Raheem Morris, this new culture set up and this new era of Atlanta Falcons football. It's a lot of money to pay. It is. But when you're not paying anyone else, you don't have a ton of big free agency guys. You got a lot of young guys on this team who aren't costing you a ton of money, who you're going to need to figure out if you're going to pay them over the next couple of years. Kirk will help you accomplish all of those things. And again, going into year 3, then you're only paying him $10 million to maybe bring along a rookie quarterback or the next future of the franchise. It makes a ton of sense. On the flip side for Minnesota is in exactly the same position as Atlanta is, and they weren't willing to give Kirk this deal. I think even if they would have told Kirk, we'll just give you 2 years, $90 million guaranteed, he probably would have done it, stuck with Minnesota. We don't know exactly what the numbers were that Minnesota was offering, but Minnesota now leaves themselves completely vulnerable. Minnesota has, a very similar roster to Atlanta, right? A lot of good pieces. The defense, you still got to work on some stuff, but offensively, you're loaded, right? Minnesota, maybe the second best wide receiver core in the NFL, with the best wide receiver in the NFL in Justin Jefferson, a great tight end, an okay offensive line. Yeah, you don't have a running back, but running backs are a dime a dozen. Go find one in the draft, right? And an offensive head coach. And Kirk was willing to leave that because the money from Atlanta was obviously so big. It just means the difference in what Minnesota was offering must have been big enough for Kirk to realize, all right, I'm going to move and uproot my family to go to less talented wide receivers and a defensive head coach and move my family and restart again because the money was that much different. Minnesota, I don't know what they're doing. I mean, Minnesota is in a very much like, you got to keep Justin Jefferson happy. Sam Darnold's not going to do it. Minnesota's got to be aggressive here, whether it's in the draft, whether it's calling about a Justin Fields, someone else. They have got to get aggressive in being way more competitive for their wide receivers heading into training camp. If you go into training camp with Sam Darnold and, a second or third round drafted quarterback, I don't know how Justin Jefferson is not going to be maybe demanding a trade by the middle of the season come the trade deadline. And that would be a nightmare for Minnesota. He's your franchise. He's your everything right now. You let the guy who kept Justin Jefferson happy out the building. And I don't know why Minnesota didn't think of Kirk in the same way that Atlanta's thinking of Kirk. We'll pay you a lot right now to stick with us, to help us stay relevant and keep building our culture while we solve the next quarterback. Now, if Minnesota's arguing, hey, well, while we have Kirk, we're never going to get high enough in the draft to go get that quarterback, I would push back and say, yeah, that's true. You're not going to end up bottoming out, right? But you have Justin Jefferson, and you don't want to have a year where you bottom out and you make all your star players unhappy and then they want out. When you have a guy like a Kirk Cousins, a Dak Prescott, a middle-of-the-road quarterback who's going to win you that 8, 9, 10 games and be on the fringe of winning your division or wild card and making the playoffs or just missing the playoffs, while the good of that is you create winning, you create stability, you can attract some free agents because you're a winning culture, right? The negative is when you want to go get that quarterback, yeah, you're going to have to give up a ton of assets to get him. And that's just the name of the game because you're never going to bottom out. You're never going to end up with one of those top 5 picks because as long as your starter, a Kirk or Dak, Jared Goff is healthy, you're going to win too many games to end up in the top 5. So Minnesota, all eyes on them. What are they doing with the quarterback position? They have absolutely the second best wide receiver core in the NFL. It's a ton of weapons, a great offensive head coach. And right now they have Sam Darnold. Interesting, very interesting. Love the Kirk and Atlanta deal. Don't look at the 4 years, $180 million. Focus on the fact that it's really 2 years at $90 million. That third year with the $10 million guaranteed is basically then we drafted a rookie. Kirk's going to help mentor this guy in the hope of that you've already established a real winning culture. Think Alex Smith and the Chiefs welcoming on in Patrick Mahomes. That's the method. That's what Atlanta's going for here. I give them credit. They have a plan. They're going for it. They're got to spend money to do it. But right now, it makes sense. Makes sense. The Atlanta Falcons have a direction. The Minnesota Vikings, where they're going, where they're headed, it doesn't seem very clear. Follow me on at Mark Hespen here on YouTube. Like and subscribe. You can follow me at Mark Hespen, MarkHespen, on Twitter/X. Also on Instagram, same thing. All 3 of those channels, YouTube, X, and Instagram at Mark Hespen. Follow the show on the Mark KHMO on Facebook, on the Mark KHMO, all one word, on Facebook, and tune in every Saturday morning to On the Mark or News Talk 1070 KHMO and the free KHMO app. See you next Wednesday.